Welcome everyone to Conversations at the Edge with Dani Katz, and the topic for today is Change Your Words, Change Your World. And Dani is a published author and a writer in various capacities, as well as an illustrator, which I refer to as Dani Tunes. I don't think that's the official title. That's my title for the cute little Dani Wisdom illustrations that she posts on Facebook, on Instagram, and where else? Where else do you post them? They're all over the place.
They're on Tumblr, they're on Twitter.
I don't even know what Tumblr is, but I've heard of Twitter, so you're on all the platforms.
All the platforms.
And so you have recently completed a book on what you call quantum languaging, correct? And
yes, that is correct.
So in a nutshell, well, if we go far back enough, of course, in the beginning there was the word, and the word was good, to take that angle on it. Well, what you have suggested here for the title is Change Your Words, Change Your World. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about what that is, what the intention is for the reader, and also what your intention and hope is for this work and these tools in the world at large. So,
sure.
Thank you.
So the book is called The New P Handbook, Volume 1, Little Languaging Hacks for Big Change. And the P in New P stands for paradigm. And I had been working on the book for a few years, and it was lingering in an unfinished state. And after the election, I was inspired to offer up tools to help us evolve our culture and heal this this illusion of a divide. And I'm very clear that the means to do that is with our words. So the gist is that words are the basic fundamental building blocks of our entire reality. They shape how we think, how we filter information, how we create our identities, how we listen, how we observe the world. Things exist because there's a word for them, and the way that we sort of frame and you know, the rules of grammar and syntax form the structure for our realities. So what I've noticed is, in terms of like the larger inspiration for putting the book out now, is how much attention people are putting on fixing the different structures and fixing the economy or the judicial system or, you know, X, Y, Z. And my perspective is that until we adjust the languaging, which is the architecture for all of those things, none of our changes are going to be effective, because our words at this point are all laid energetic frequencies of limitation, lack, scarcity, and those vibrational frequencies are informing everything that we create. So the gist with quantum languaging is it's the science and study of the energetic frequencies of words. And every word vibrates at its own unique frequency. And so whereas in the past, we've thought of language in terms of intellectual connotation and definitions of words, it's reductive. And because every word is vibrating at a specific frequency, those frequencies are in turn affecting our emotional body, our psyches, our energetic bodies. And until now, we haven't been attuned to those frequencies when choosing our words. And it does us a great disservice. So this science informs people and allows them to practice using words in a more integrated, in highest service to our own personal goals, our relationships, and then our work in the world at large.
Awesome. Well, that is a good synopsis on the overview here. A question that immediately comes up based on what you just shared is, okay, so how do I formulate this? So words affect reality, correct? And the words have a vibrational reality unto themselves beyond just how we usually think of what a word is. But I guess the question is, so if how we choose our words based on their vibrational potency is going to affect reality, how does it work the other way around? Like, I'm trying to find the right way to word this. If we vibrationally change, might we choose different words? Also, the other being, if we choose different words, does it change us vibrationally? I think that's what I'm kind of getting at there is, you know, with the chicken and egg part of this, if you will, like where does it start?
Right. Well, it remains a chicken and an egg sort of inquiry. And to answer your first question, as far as you know, how words can hinder and how words can help, is that, you know, some of these vibrational frequencies are expansive. Some of these frequencies, and so it's sort of a fake it until you make it thing. Like if I'm dealing with starting a big project or venture, and you know, there's a lot of heavy lifting. If I'm speaking in terms of how hard it is and how much work there is to do, and I'm trying to do this, all that heaviness and effort is laden in my communication, and then that's the energetic frequency that's spreading. When I choose to say, this is moving forward swiftly, I am continuing to attract allies and, you know, materials that are allowing this to manifest much more quickly, then these, you know, these energies will then amplify ease and support and whatnot. When it comes to, you know, the subconscious mind is responsible for 1% of our experience. So we're all operating with belief systems that support us in being amazing and belief systems that are working against us. So at first, I find it's really helpful if I'm dealing with, you know, self-esteem issues, or if I've had, you know, bad experiences in relationships. So instead of speaking to the self-esteem issues or the negative experiences, if I reframe them by speaking with languaging that's more positive and speaking more to opportunity, that is going to allow my frequency to raise and to start bringing in experiences that are lovelier. At the same time, when I'm speaking in vibrational frequencies that aren't a match to the belief systems, right? If I'm still dealing with a contracted belief system and I'm speaking to a higher vibrational frequency, then the distortions are going to start to come out. But that's the beauty, and that's the beauty of this languaging practice, is it brings these distortions to the surface and the things that are out of balance. So I'll start to feel weird if I'm saying, you know, I am a bastion of abundance and money flows freely to me, if that's not in line with my belief system. And so I would say step is changing the language, because every word matters. So if I'm speaking to difficulties and challenges now, I'm seeding my future incarnation with those challenges, versus speaking to the upgraded frequency and then allowing my 3D life to catch up. Then step 2 is going to be diving in and reframing the belief systems that are informing these negative speech patterns in the first place. Right. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. One of the questions that comes up for me is, how do you speak to, how do you use this approach when speaking to things that are painful or challenging? Because you're speaking about, like, articulating things in such a way that they're expansive and seed new potential for the future. And in doing so, there can be a more apparent disconnect, or the incongruence between where you are and where you're going shows up. But
absolutely,
what about, you know, like, you know, if you're having a bad day, like you're having a challenging day, you're feeling not so great, like, how does one speak to one's present moment experience in a way that is another more preferable experience? Like, do you see where I'm getting? Like, how do you speak to, like,
I do.
because that can, it's almost like, you know, being able, sometimes it seems like people can get so scared of like, I'm going to say the wrong thing, like when describing how I'm feeling. So how do you speak to that?
Yeah, it's a great question because there can be a lot of spiritual bypassing
Right.
if we're not using this work authentically. So one thing is, I'm a big believer in past tensing shadow experiences. So whereas I might be feeling a residual emotion based on past traumas, it's important to language the past traumas and behavior patterns in the past. So if it's as simple as, you know, historically, I had a really hard time finding parking in downtown Los Angeles. I'm speaking to, and granted, that's a very light shadow, so to speak.
Right.
I'm speaking to past experience, and I'm also freeing myself up to have a different experience in the present moment. And that applies to heavier things as well. You know, in the past, I've made some really unwise choices when it comes to business partners. So we're speaking to our experience and also acknowledging that I'm sovereign being in this moment and I can make a different choice and anything can change at any moment. And I think when it comes, you know, feelings are feelings, and we all, you know, we all experience negative feelings. And I think it's important to be honest with, you know, I'm feeling this right now. And at the same time, not creating any stories around it, not drawing any conclusions, not making any character assessments, just sticking with the fact, this is how I feel right now. But, and also at the same time, the way I'll do it is say an aspect of me, you know, like an aspect of me is really freaked out about the numbers in my bank account, right? So then I'm acknowledging that there are multiple parts of me, and I'm not empowering any one aspect, especially any one disempowered aspect, in running this whole vehicle and then shaping my life accordingly.
So I wanted to kind of expand a little on what you were saying about the conclusions issue. Like, you know, so when we're, you know, to use an example, I mean, sometimes, you know, a sensation that we might label anxiety could arise, and there could be a variety of circumstances surrounding that. But if I were to just speak to, wow, I'm feeling this unease in my belly, well, there's no conclusion. It's not even actually negative or positive. It's just descriptive. So if things are challenging or not necessarily like the most pleasant, like, ooh, this doesn't feel good. I've got this weird feeling in my belly, or my head is kind of buzzing with a lot of activity. It's descriptive, but it's not drawing a conclusion and not linking it to patterns, either past or future.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of clarify that.
Yes, and to clarify as well, it's also acknowledging that this is an aspect of a larger experience. So if I'm experiencing a constriction in my chest and a fast heartbeat, at the same time, I'm not empowering those to define my entire experience, because I also have the use of all of my limbs and digits and senses. And so I'm acknowledging, and I'm not giving undue attention or power to any of these so-called negative experiences, and as well, not drawing any conclusions of like, this sucks, this is bad, I'm having a terrible day, I'm not comfortable in this moment. An aspect of me isn't comfortable in this moment, and it's empowering a larger aspect of me that is able to observe that and not totally give my grounded centeredness, you know, sense of peace to this one aspect of my overall experience.
So rather than letting any particular experience or conclusion about an experience overwhelm you, you acknowledge it, you notice it, but you don't let it take over, essentially.
Exactly. I don't define myself by it. I'm not creating an identity in the moment based upon it.
Right. So taking this kind of from the personal into the bigger meta realm of culture and the world, how do you see this well, there are two aspects of it. One would be what do you hope for, and the other is how do you see this being implemented and used in a way that will have change on the ground out in the world. Like, so starting with the word, the vibration, what happens with this going into the world and into culture?
Great question. And we use words all day, every day. So I see it as the most efficient way for us to revolutionize our culture. And I want to be transparent. I have some misgivings about the word because etymology and sort of cultural agreements about words are a part of this quantum languaging work. And so revolution does speak to a going backwards, and it also can sometimes imply violence. So I'm going to speak to it as evolution. I see it as the most efficient way for us to evolve our culture. It does seem that we're at a critical point, and I know that this is a challenge that humanity is poised to triumph, because it's impossible to manifest a challenge that doesn't have the solution embedded in it, in a realm of equal and opposite forces. And I see language as the smartest, most efficient means of shifting, because we all use words all day, every day. It doesn't take extra practice. The gist is it just takes awareness and learning these tenets, and then the discipline to practice and a community to practice with, because we're all using words to disempower ourselves and to sabotage ourselves and to spread contraction. We're not aware of it. We just don't know that we're doing it. And I've seen several, leaders and coaches delivering speeches intended to inspire. And I'm watching, because I see the energy, and I'm watching them unconsciously shut down their audience. So I see this as really having the power to change the world for the better. And those are my highest hopes for it.
So just something interesting pops up as you're describing these leaders speaking in such a way that was shutting down their audience. Although I don't know those specific situations, a little curious kind of thought comes up. What happens when one person is really clear on their languaging, and then the people they're speaking to are not nearly caught up with that? Can some of the reactions to that more evolved and more powerful way of communicating actually shut people down temporarily because they're not used to it?
Yes and no. So
okay.
I more often than not, I see that when someone is attuned to these languaging precepts and really on top of their languaging, that has a tendency to sort of spread to other, expand their ability to master their language.
Okay.
The pushback that I've seen recently is around what I call separation speak, which with identity politics and a lot of the baiting that's going on is really at a critical point. And so where I've seen people get triggered is when people are really identified with separation, and when they're really identified with creating a barrier between themselves and other people, and speaking in a more inclusive way threatens that separation.
Gotcha.
And this is the only pushback I've seen and I've experienced firsthand.
Gotcha. So, I mean, I guess kind of vibrational cleanness, if you will, in terms of how we what we're intending seems to be important, because it seems like, since you're talking about the realm of politics, I mean, there are a lot of people who all want change, and they all think their version of change would make things better. And then they're speaking to that, but they're speaking to that in a way, I guess, that requires others to either agree or disagree. So how does one language it in such a way where you're not actually seeking agreement or disagreement, but something other than that? that might actually pull people together?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it comes down to inclusivity. You know, quantum languaging is expansive, it's inclusive, and it's rife with possibilities. So when people are making political choices or favoring things that don't include what's best for the whole, then it's not the right answer. You know, so you know, take for instance a white supremacist rally. It's very easy to put people in a box called Nazi and shut ourselves down from hearing a message, right? Because when we label things and we give people names, that separation speak right away. They're different from us. Right. But when we're inclusive and when we can say, okay, here's what I want. I want us all to be respected. I want unity. I want equal treatment. What do you want? Inclusive in here's what I think is best. What are you wanting to attain? And then finding the Venn diagram of crossover, then we're on the right track. So it's availing ourselves to points of view that might trigger us, because when it comes down to it fundamentally, like, we're all human. We all want the same things. We want safety. We want to feel safe. We want food. We want shelter. We want love. We want to feel acknowledged. We want to feel useful. So we might have different ways of going about it. But another big piece of quantum languaging is listening and availing ourselves to what does everyone want here, and what choices can we make that are in highest good for all interests in service to light and life.
Well, you're going to find a lot of agreement with me on this because we're kind of on the same page there. But I do, as you're speaking of this, wonder, like, I was putting myself in someone else's shoes who might hear what you say, and their response might be, well, I don't really care how this works out for other people. I just want what I want for me, my family, and the community that I identify with, and the whole is not my concern. So that's kind of speaks to the old paradigm of very specific groupings by race, by class, by culture, and so on and so forth, that there's still a lot of people who are very strongly identified with their either a group they have organically come by. I mean, if you have a certain race, I mean, that's not a choice, but a culture or a grouping, people are still quite identified with those things. So how would languaging help someone who doesn't actually think in terms of the whole maybe begin to see the value of that?
Well, a big part of the languaging is, the whole book is written as an us and as a we. There's no prescriptive you and me. Again, there's no separation. Okay. Gotcha. And the point of view is, that's nice that we have our racial and our cultural affiliations. That's lovely. And when it comes down to it, we're all earthlings. And given that that is what's the biggest threat right now, it's really a wise moment to deprioritize our identities and focus on the earth and how to protect ourselves as one unified species. And for people who aren't on that page, anyone can benefit from quantum language. Of course, I have these high-minded ideals of how people are going to use it. And as far as personal achievement, as far as manifesting goals, as far as building a business and building clients and translating one's message to the world and improving relationships, quantum languaging is a great practice for all of those pieces. And going back to, an earlier question, my highest hope is that people are using these tenets to bring peace and unity and abundance to our entire planet, but it's not required.
But that would be nice. Well,
It'd be lovely.
I guess that kind of brings things around a little bit to the question of the specific application with the book that you've created. So you just alluded to that now. And by the way, the way it sounded in terms of what you were talking about is, if people who have an intention of doing good things in the world with their work, whether that be, say, as a coach or a leader of some kind, or could be civil rights or anything like that. If they use more of these tools, essentially you're saying that work will be more effective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As I said, there are words that contract and there are words that expand. So take a word like should. If I'm a coach or a CEO and I'm speaking to a board of directors or a group of clients, and at any point in indicating something that I think might be wise for them to do, I use the word should on an energetic level, that's going to shut down a good portion of the audience and make whatever advice or ideas trailing that should a lot harder to land. So a lot of these tools are simply to allow people to open up to hear our message. There are a lot of these tools, given how people's attention spans are shrinking and 140 character elevator speeches are sort of the way people are presenting themselves. Quantum language is a more efficient means of translating our least amount of time with the least amount of words. Quantum language is great when it comes to healing and, attuning our bodies to the frequencies of health. It's great for relationships as far as creating peace and harmony and space for people to feel acknowledged and, moving away from words that inadvertently trigger. So many of our disagreements and our interpersonal kerfuffles are simply semantics, So often we have good intentions and it's just using words, in wonky ways that creates a big bunch of drama that could be easily avoided with just a little bit more awareness.
Right. So who do you see, certainly initially, being drawn to this book and who would benefit from it the most?
Absolutely anyone on a transformational path and committed to their own growth and evolving. People who are in the manifestation conversation for sure. People who are into law of attraction and The Secret, coaches, healers, salespeople. Those people are gonna get immediate benefits from these languaging tenets. They're super simple. Matter of being aware and then practicing, getting the habit of hearing ourselves and attuning to our blind spots.
And so, is this book published and out now, or is it? What's the status of it?
It is in the process of publishing November 1st. It'll be
November
on sale.
1st. Okay, so when we're done with this video, we'll make sure to get a link to your website and your mailing list and all of that so people can stay in touch with you and get this book. The millions of people who will be on your list by November 1st and will be rushing to get your book. Well, that's awesome. And, earlier I made a little note to myself. This was a little kind of a side note regarding words. Since you're such an aficionado regarding words and their power, I imagine you probably saw the news story, I think it might have been last year, about the history of the word blue.
No.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing to throw in here because what there was a study done on this, and they found that in the English language, when they actually look back, they find that there wasn't a word for blue until less than 400 years ago. And when they look back at literature from prior to a certain point, I think even in Shakespeare's time, they didn't speak of blue. So when they describe the sea, it's not described as blue. It's described as a shade of gray. And they looked at other cultures and, of course, you may know about, like, in the Inuit cultures, there are like over 50 words for snow.
Right.
But they did find that there's this correlation that it seems like people don't see something as a culture until there's a word for it. And there's a correlation of that awareness that, scientifically one could say that whatever blue is out in nature, you know, whether it be in the sky or the sea or a flower, was always there. But human culture, or maybe in this case specifically Western culture, didn't see blue until they came up with a word for it when they began to really become aware of it as something unto itself. So I guess in some ways your work really ties into, by finding new languaging, even new words or new clearer use of words, that actually, I mean, it's happening because we're becoming more aware, but as we become more aware and we use our language carefully to describe it, it can have a shift, you know, it can create a shift culturally. Because I imagine like 400 years ago, someone was looking at a flower or the sea and going, this is really unique. This particular shade of gray. Ooh, I don't know. It's not really gray. Let me look closer. And they just keep looking and looking. And oh no, it's something special, and I need a name for that. And once you actually get a name for it, and then you tell other people, look at this. This is blue.
Well,
anyways.
I think that's if they were seeing it at all, because the way the brain works, it's like there's an infinite amount of sensory input at any moment. And so the brain organizes through language. So without a word for the color blue, because words establish isness, right? They establish existential validity. So without a word for blue, I wonder if people were even registering another shade. You know, like when Columbus's ships came, the native people didn't even see them because they had never seen ships. They didn't have a word for ships. So as they were looking at the horizon, they weren't seeing them at all. And you look at like this sort of more recent deplorable practice of ghosting, right? Communication and disappear. I've been watching this, and I feel like since we've given it a name and given it existential validity, now all of a sudden people are exchanging or not exchanging like this all the time. I think there's been a huge increase in the instance of ghosting since we've given it a name and established it as something that is. And I know in a lot of Aboriginal cultures, like when someone was cast out of society, they would stop using that person's name because in a sense, they were no longer to exist. And similarly, how it translates as far as, you know, how you and I would practice quantum languaging is to not speak about the qualities that we no longer want to be fostering in ourselves. You know, if I or if I'm addicted to caffeine, my wisest move is to not talk about these things and to not talk about gambling and to not keep naming the caffeine habit, to remove those words and those ideas from my lexicon and let their isness fade away. Right.
You know, that's you know, it could be an interesting discussion unto itself because you know, although I have not personally ever gone to AA, I have lots of friends who have. And one thing that always struck me is there's this emphasis on you're an alcoholic, you will always be an alcoholic, and you're absolutely powerless over it.
Totally.
And there are, in other parts of the world, there are other systems that I'm familiar with through friends. Say in England, they have, the government there doesn't support AA because they don't see that it works. And they have something called harm reduction, where they look at what is the harm being caused by the behavior and what solutions can be put in place to reduce harm and make things better. So the focus is not on the drinking, it's on what harm is being done by the behavior and what's causing it and what could improve. And they have much more success with that because it's a totally different focal point.
Totally. I mean, Buckminster Fuller spoke about this as far as like, if you want to affect change, you don't fight the problem, you focus on the solution you're creating. Right. Yeah.
And that, I guess, is a really, and that seems to be a really great way of kind of bringing to focus this whole dialogue. It's about finding what is an effective way to create solutions, because when we look out in the world, whether it be the one-on-one conflict we can have in our personal relationships, or politically, or countries, or all of the different conflict that seems to be going on, a lot of people aren't necessarily solution-oriented, and those that affects the languaging. They're not actually speaking to wanting a solution. They're speaking to wanting to blame, for example.
Absolutely, absolutely. Though they're identified with the fight, and that's something that's doing us a disservice. I just wrote a piece about some street art I saw in Echo Park. There's a sign that says "Resist Hate," and it's like, well, you just put hate into my consciousness, and we know from David Hawking's work in Power versus Force, the energetic of resistance is not very efficient. How about we just foster peace? You know,
right.
Be the change instead of focusing on this thing that we need to fight and beat down. And that is a paradigm that I'm really, really excited to support us shifting.
Right. You know, in martial arts, in, for example, Aikido and Tai Chi, and, you know, the softer, what they call the softer martial arts, one doesn't resist, one yields and redirects. So there's a soft receiving of the attack, and by being soft in the receiving of the attack, you're actually matching. Well, instead of you're not matching the energy of the attack. So rigidity is not being met with rigidity; it's being met with softness, just like, you know, earth being received by, you know, water. It's like there's two different energies, and it's we need to receive at a higher level than what the attack is. So I can see what you're saying. You know,
exactly.
Resistance and hate are very similar, and they're trying to cancel each other out. But if you meet hate with curiosity and the desire to understand, wow, tell me about all the things you hate. Well, that's a very different position than I'm not even going to listen to you because I'm going to validate that you feel the way you do.
Exactly. And then you're also, you know, if we're resisting hate, we're surrendering our peace to lower our vibration, to be in an adversarial relationship, versus holding the vibration of peace and inviting others to meet us there.
Right. So it seems like a lot of times people, you know, when they see things out in the world that they feel is hateful, I mean, there's a contraction, right? Oh my God, I am so frightened of all these hateful things. But that contraction, and if it's followed by the action of, okay, now I have to actively resist, but you're actively resisting from a contracted place, which is just going to foster more conflict. So this quantum languaging then would be about, you know, not ignoring what you see in the world, not ignoring it, but redirecting it to a higher level with your words and your actions. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Acknowledgement is a really big piece of it. Like, yes, I acknowledge you're frustrated, you're pissed off, you're this, and it's holding our vibration and inviting people to meet and find collaborative solutions that serve the whole from that place.
Right.
And the other thing that I wanted to speak to, just because you'd mentioned about the blue conversation, is that there's no word in the adjective version of having integrity. That word actually does not exist, which I find so interesting and also frustrating. And similarly, because if there's not a word for it, then how are we to embody it and spread it? And so another big piece of quantum languages is really encouraging people to make up new words, because our language isn't done. And, you know, let's co-create a more functional language. Similarly, you know, the words unlimited, limitless, they demand that we utter the word limit. So they demand that we still speak to the vibrational frequency that we're allegedly getting away from.
So, because essentially, we're essentially saying other than this, rather than pointing directly to something.
Unlimited, the way the subconscious mind works is it's connecting to the vibration of limited. It's not hearing the un. It's actually expanding on the limitation.
Well, because in a sense, limitless is I mean, it's being defined by limits, right? So, in a curious way, you know, the word limitless isn't what we think it is, because it's in relation to limits. And if something were truly
Absolutely.
unlimited, and it's like, I can feel the challenge in just trying to speak of this, like, but if something were truly unlimited, it wouldn't acknowledge limit.
Not at all. No, I've come up with the word omniscopic.
Omniscopic. Ooh.
Omniscopic, meaning availing oneself to any possibility that is, was, or ever will be. So it's a different word for limitless that actually is not tethered to the vibrational frequency of limitation.
Right, because and I know, and I have friends in the coaching industry that use the concept of limitlessness as part of what they're here to help people with. But it does become curious, because the mind is then going to look for limits to overcome. Whereas if you have another word which doesn't even it's not to not acknowledge limits, but if you're trying to actually create something that is beyond limits, it has to be, I can see what you're saying. It has to have another word that isn't tethered to the...
Exactly.
Yeah. So, wow. So you've got pretty much a full-time job ahead of you of making up new words.
Well, I'm hoping to expand this community so that other people are...
Well, that becomes interesting then. So community, you talked about community in relation to this. So obviously when the book comes out, someone can read the book, begin to apply it in their day-to-day life, in their work, whatever that work is. But then you were talking about community. What would that look like? How would people that are interested in this support each other on that journey?
Yeah, community is really key for this, because I've been playing with these languaging tenets for about 10 years. And, as aware as I am, I have blind spots. And so I have a group of friends who practice these tenets together. And it's so helpful to have someone else paying attention to correct me. Like I heard myself just say, I hope to expand this community. I am expanding this community.
Right.
So to have other people, extra ears and eyes. The way that looks is to share the book with our friends, to share these tenets with our friends. It's really important to have agreements to make sure that we're open to languaging coaching. It rarely works to offer someone languaging coaching if we don't have permission, because then the ego kicks in and it can get ugly. I am doing languaging salons here in Los Angeles, and I'm hoping to expand. Click cancel delete. I am planning to expand and do some online versions. It's really, really helpful to have other people involved in this, especially if you're working in a group or a team or an organization, to have everyone on board and just have this agreement to support one another.
Awesome. Well, so obviously, like even with yourself, it's a work in progress of implementing. Once we see something, we can see it, and then the process of shifting. I guess it would be the same, like if you were an athlete and you're training to be at a higher level of functioning to do a marathon, or to do a specific reach a specific goal. Or just expand your capacity. It's not a one-shot deal. You set the intention, I am going to do this marathon, and then as you're training, you notice what is perhaps in the way of achieving that, and you refine and you hone that craft.
Yeah, it's absolutely a practice. There's other people are doing different versions of this work, and Neville Goddard is one of them, and there's a philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. He was, had his version of this work, and both of those men said, the precepts are simple, and it is really, a challenging life's work to master these. And to be perfectly honest, it's definitely part of what's taken me so long to write this book was I'm not perfect, I still say if and just and this and that, and it doesn't matter. We're all doing the best we can. We're all works in progress. Perfecting this human vehicle is it's a verb, you know, it's something that's we continue to do and get better at, and it's not linear. And I'm excited to be expanding the community so that there are more people with eyes and ears to call me in on my own languaging patterns.
Right. Well, you know, as you were speaking of that, I remembered a quote from the Canadian pianist Glenn Gould. I don't know if you know of him, but he was very eccentric and incredibly talented, and particularly known for his beautiful renditions of Bach's piano's work. But he once famously said, I could teach someone everything they need to know about playing piano in 15 minutes. Everything else is practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, he was acknowledging that the actual components of what he did and what is done is simple. There's just a lot of it, and putting that all together in that level of artfulness is only a matter of practice. It's not a matter of the individual blocks, the building blocks and components to it aren't actually complicated.
Not at all. Not at all. The precepts are so simple, and we have decades of disempowering languaging patterns to undo and to reprogram. And it is simple. It's a mindfulness practice is really what it is. It's about being disciplined and being aware and having the courage to say clear, cancel, delete when, you know, we hear ourselves speak in a disempowering way, and try again. And, you know, tenacity and a great sense of humor and self-forgiveness.
Yeah, that seems to apply to all of life. But so as we kind of begin to wrap up here, it comes to mind that it might be nice to do a follow-up conversation on this in November, when the book actually comes out. And you know, you gave me a pre-published copy of the book, so I'm going to have a chance to really dive into it between now and then as well. So would you like to do you take the challenge, the invitation to maybe talk about this in a little more detail come November? Okay, we'll put it on the calendar. So thank you so much for joining me on Conversations at the Edge with such
Thanks for having me.
Such a powerful topic. And well, you know, I'm a long-term fan of yours, and in terms of the work that I've seen you put out there, and so I'm super excited to dive into this book. Any last words you'd like to leave people with?
To remember, every word matters. If you're antsy for this information, I have a lot of videos about this on my YouTube channel. I'm sure we can include the link later. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, so everyone, be mindful of your words and the power the words have, and take that power seriously, but have fun.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much, Dani. I am going to end the broadcast here, and we will post any relevant links in the description and in the comments. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Christian.
Okay, bye now.